Hello and welcome to Firstpost Spotlight, where we bring you stories that matter to you from all across the world. From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, we shed light on issues that shape our world. I'm Joshua Barnes, live from the Firstpost studios. Let's begin with the top headlines. Japan scrambles fighter jets after detecting a suspected Chinese drone near its southwestern islands, as tensions between Tokyo and Beijing rise over missile deployments and sharp exchanges on Taiwan and regional security. French President Emmanuel Macron says Donald Trump's Ukraine peace plan is a step in the right direction, but warned it must be improved, insisting that any deal must not amount to Ukrainian surrender. The United Nations calls for swift and impartial investigations into Israeli strikes in Lebanon, urging accountability for the deadly hit on a Palestinian refugee camp in southern Lebanon, among other incidents. Stocks in Asia follow Wall Street's gains as confidence builds over a potential Federal Reserve interest rate cut in December, while shares in technology companies rebound. And tropical cyclone Verbena brings heavy rain and flooding to low-lying areas in central Philippines, worsening conditions for a country that has already been battered by over 20 typhoons this year. We begin with today's lead story. There is a major shift in high-skilled immigration as US government data shows H-1B visas approved for Indian-based companies have plunged, while American tech giants now dominate new H-1B recruitment, marking a significant shift in the way high-skilled foreign workers are entering the United States. The National Foundation for American Policy, or NAFP, analysed US government data and found that only 3 Indian companies, namely Tata Consultancy Services, LTI Mindtree, and HCL America, remain in the top 25 employers for new H-1B approvals in the fiscal year 2025. The report notes that Indian IT firms, which once dominated H-1B sponsorship, are now using very few new visas. Instead, US tech giants like Amazon, Meta, Microsoft and Google are now driving most of the new applications. According to the NFAP, the top 7 Indian-based companies received just 4,573 H-1B approvals for initial employment in the 2025 financial year. That is a 70% drop since 2015 and a 37% fall from last year. The majority of employers still sponsor only a handful of H-1B workers. In 2025, 61% were approved for only one petition, and over 72% of all new H-1B approvals went to companies with 100 or fewer new hires. The report also notes that job transfers are frequent, with more than 68,000 petitions approved for workers moving between employers in the US this year. However, denial rates remain low, with only 2.8% for initial employment in 2025, which is far below the 24% peak during Trump's first term. The Trump administration has introduced a $100,000 fee for new H-1B petitions. The policy, however, faces court challenges, with business groups arguing it could damage US competitiveness. The H-1B debate has intensified during President Donald Trump's second term, even as his administration defends the need for high-skilled foreign workers to support US industries. Trump's political base insists that foreign workers undercut American jobs. In fact, Trump has publicly pushed back against criticism from his own MAGA supporters over the use of H-1B workers. Speaking at the US-Saudi Investment Forum, Trump said America's new chip factories cannot operate without high-skilled foreign talent, and that these workers are essential to train the US workforce in advanced manufacturing. Let's listen in.
But you're building plants that make things that are very, very detailed, and you have to have great knowledge. And you're coming here and you find if we don't have people that did that before, we are allowing you, and I may take a little heat. I always take a little heat from my people, the people that love me and the people that I love. They happen to be toward the right of center, toward the right. Sometimes they're way right. But If you have to bring people to get those plants opened, we want you to do that. And we want those people to teach our people how to make computer chips and how to make other things.
As scrutiny on employment-based visas increases, Indian professionals are rapidly shifting towards EB-1A and EB-2 national interest waiver green cards. The US CIS received over 7,300 EB-1A petitions in the first quarter of 2025. That's a 56% jump from the previous quarter. Law firms also report growing interest from Indian nationals seeking these routes for faster processing and greater security amid tech layoffs. Experts say many are trying to avoid relying on employer-based visas given policy uncertainty and backlog. The new numbers reveal a broader shift in America's high-skilled immigration landscape, where US companies are now leading H-1B hiring and more Indian professionals are turning to alternative pathways as policies tighten. Next up, we move to a high-stakes phone call between Washington and Beijing that has opened a new chapter in an already tense geopolitical triangle. On Monday, US President Donald Trump and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping spoke on the phone. According to statements from Chinese officials, the conversation swept through a wide range of issues, including trade, Russia's war in Ukraine, fentanyl, and the increasingly contested question of Taiwan. But it was the issue of Taiwan that dominated this call. According to Beijing, President Xi told Trump that what China calls the return of Taiwan is an integral piece of the post-World War II international order, one he said was forged with the United States in their joint fight against fascism. China's foreign ministry also claimed President Trump acknowledged how central the Taiwan issue is to Beijing. Taipei, however, wasted no time in pushing back. On Tuesday, Taiwan's premier said that people have made their position clear, adding that a return to China is not an option.
We must once again emphasize to the Republic of China that Taiwan is a fully sovereign and independent country. For the 23 million people of our nation, return is not an option.
Taiwan's elected government insists it's already a self-governing democratic entity with its own political identity and its own future. President Trump, for his part, made no mention of Taiwan when he confirmed the call on Truth Social. Instead, he highlighted what he described as extremely strong US-China relations and announced reciprocal state visits, first to Beijing in April and then a return visit to Washington later this year. This comes as reports suggest that the US might be considering allowing Nvidia to sell its advanced AI chips to China, further hinting at renewed ties between the countries. The heated backdrop makes this moment even more volatile. China is already locked in a diplomatic standoff with Japan, a key US ally, after new Prime Minister Sanei Takaichi suggested Tokyo could militarily intervene if Taiwan were attacked. That remark triggered a sharp downturn in diplomatic ties between the two countries. And in an interesting twist, Prime Minister Takaichi said she too spoke with President Trump, discussing his call with Xi and the wider security picture in the Indo-Pacific.
President Trump told me that we are very close friends and that I could call him at any time. Regarding the content of our talks, as it is related to diplomatic exchanges, I would like to refrain from disclosing details.
And this all comes as Washington continues to walk a delicate diplomatic tightrope. The United States does not formally recognize Taiwan as a sovereign state, but it is the island's most significant partner and its largest arms supplier. Meanwhile, trade tensions from the second major pillar of the Trump-Xi relationship. Monday's call follows their in-person meeting in October, their first since 2019. That session in South Korea brought a temporary truce in a trade war that has rattled markets for months. But tariffs, averaging just under 50%, still loom over billions of dollars of goods. And these conversations move from private phone lines to global headlines. The world is left watching a fragile balance, one that could shift with a single call, a single statement, or a single miscalculation. Let's shift our focus to Asia. Once again, relations between two neighbours have soured, with Afghan officials blaming Pakistan for a renewed strike inside their territory. According to Afghan officials, Pakistani forces carried out airstrikes on civilian areas. A Taliban spokesperson said a house was bombed in Khost province, killing 9 children and 1 woman. He also said strikes in other eastern provinces injured 4 more civilians. The Afghan government has warned that it will respond at the right time to the Pakistani strikes. So far, the Pakistani government and military have not commented. The strikes came a day after a suicide bombing at the Federal Constabulary headquarters in Pakistan's Peshawar, which killed 3 officers and injured 11 others. A faction of the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP, claimed responsibility for the attack. But Pakistan's state broadcaster reported that the attackers were Afghan nationals. And this is not the first time Pakistan has accused Afghanistan of being linked to such suicide attacks.
इस्लामाबाद में एक बहुत अंदोनाक वाक़या हुआ दहशतगर्दी का। दहशतगर्दों ने इस्लामाबाद की जो जुडिशियल कॉम्प्लेक्स था उसको निशाना बनाया था, लेकिन अफरा तफरी में उनको कुछ न सूझा और वहां पर उन्होंने अपने आप को एक्सप्लोड किया। ये बात अब कोई ढकी छुपी बात नहीं।
But the Taliban government has repeatedly denied Pakistani allegations. Afghanistan remains firm that it does not allow its territory to be used for attacks on Pakistan. Kabul says it does not harbour terrorists and argues that Pakistan allows groups of hostile Afghanistan to operate. The Afghan side says Pakistan must respect its sovereignty. Just hours after the suicide bombing yesterday, a Pakistani diplomat in Afghanistan met a key Afghan governor. The meeting was held amid rising tensions, with both sides reportedly discussing ways to ease strains in their ties. Relations between the two sides have taken a downturn since the Taliban returned to power in 2021, a government Pakistan once saw as a friend, but now views with growing suspicion. Tensions rose further after the October border clashes, which reportedly killed around 70 people on both sides. Qatar and Turkey brokered a ceasefire, but the talks failed to produce lasting solutions.
The talks didn't succeed because during the discussions, the Pakistani side attempted to shift all responsibility for its security to the Afghan government, while showing no willingness to take responsibility for either Afghanistan's security or its own. That is why the talks were concluded without any results.
Pakistan's defence minister said discussions on cross-border terrorism were over and had entered an indefinite phase. After that, the Afghan Taliban suspended trade ties, while Pakistan had already closed its border for trade soon after the clashes. The impasse is not just taking a human and security toll, it is carrying a heavy economic cost as well. The Pakistan-Afghanistan Joint Chamber of Commerce says thousands of containers are stuck at the border, each adding heavy daily charges. With strikes, accusations and denials continuing on both sides, the wait is now for diplomacy to pick up again. But with trade frozen, talks stalled and security tensions rising, any future breakthrough will depend on whether Pakistan and Afghanistan can return to the table and find common ground. And on to our last story. What happens when someone dies? Our world fills with sorrow, rituals begin, and every culture has its own way of helping a soul find peace. But in Thailand, a moment meant for mourning turned into pure disbelief. A woman believed to be dead suddenly stirred inside her coffin just moments before her cremation. Footage from the temple showed monks gathering around the truck, some of them smiling in relief. The temple staff had prepared for a simple cremation, but one of them heard a faint knock from the coffin. A woman, 65 years old, slightly opened her eyes and moved her head. Doctors later diagnosed her with severe hypoglycemia, dangerously low blood sugar, and confirmed she had not suffered cardiac or respiratory failure. The temple abbot even offered to cover her medical expenses. According to her brother, she had been bedridden for 2 years, and 2 days earlier she became unresponsive and appeared to stop breathing. Believing she had passed, he placed her inside of a coffin. He did not have a death certificate. But is this the first time something like this has happened? Well, certainly not. Around the world, there have been cases where people were brought to cremation grounds for their final rites, only for life to take an unexpected U-turn at the last moment. Often, medical help isn't sought, sometimes because of money, sometimes because families assume that when someone stops breathing, they're gone. But negligence mixed with assumptions can be dangerous. And when it involves a human life, it can be deadly. When life chooses not to give up, even a coffin cannot hold it. This story is a reminder that before closing a coffin, certainty must come from medical care and not assumptions. In this case, what was meant to be a final farewell became a second chance. A coffin prepared for the dead, opened for the living. That's all we have on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, thank you for watching.
From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, shedding light on the world's top headlines, detailed analysis on the stories that matter the most to you. Catch it all on Spotlight at 6 p.m. India time and 12:30 GMT, only on Firstpost.
Hello and welcome to Firstpost Live, where we bring you the day's top 4 stories from across the world. I'm Joshua Barnes, live from the Firstpost studios. Let's begin with the headlines. French President Emmanuel Macron